The ice winds howled across the frozen surface of Kelthera like angry spirits. Snow fell in thick sheets that buried everything in white. The planet had no warmth, no mercy, only cold that could kill in minutes. Deep beneath the frozen ground, the mining tunnels stretched for miles. The sound of metal hitting ice echoed through the dark passages. Human workers moved like shadows in the dim light. Their breath came out in white clouds. Their hands were red and cracked from the cold. Myra stood at the edge of the main tunnel. Her blue skin looked almost black in the poor light. Ice crystals grew from her shoulders and arms like living jewelry. This was normal for her people. The Vorthok were made for cold worlds like this one. She watched the humans work with eyes that showed nothing. No feeling. No care. They were tools to her. Nothing more. Some tools broke. Some tools died. New tools could always be found. "Move faster," she said to a group of workers. Her voice was as cold as the air around them. "The morning quota is not finished." The humans looked at her with hate in their eyes, but they said nothing. They had learned not to speak back. Those who did rarely lived to regret it. Dongwon was different from the others. Mireille had noticed this about him. He was tall for a human. His black hair was longer than the others because he somehow avoided the monthly head shaving. His eyes held something she did not understand. It was not fear. It was not hate. It was something else. He worked with steady hands, even when the cold made others shake. When another worker fell down, Dongwon helped them up. When someone could not lift their tools, he shared his strength. He did this quietly. He thought no one was watching, but Mireille was always watching. "You," she called to him. "Human worker 743. Dongwon stopped his work. He turned to face her. Most humans looked down when she spoke to them. He looked directly at her face. "Yes," he said simply. "Why do you help the weak ones?" Dongwon was quiet for a moment. Around them, other workers had stopped to listen. The tunnel felt even colder than before. "They are not weak," he said finally. "They are tired, hungry, cold. Same as everyone else here." Mireille studied his face. The Vorthok had taught her that emotions were weakness. Helping others made you weak. Only the strong survived. Only the strong deserved to survive. "Helping them slows down the work," she said. "Maybe, but we all work better when we work together." This confused her. In Vorthok society, each person fought for themselves. The weak died. The strong lived. This was the natural way. This was the right way. She turned away from him without another word. There was work too. Supervise. Quotas to meet. The Empire expected results. The mining operation on Kelthera was important to the Vorthok Empire. The planet held rare crystals deep in its frozen core. These crystals powered their ships and weapons. They made the Empire strong. But getting the crystals was dangerous work. The ice was hard. The tunnels could collapse. The cold killed workers regularly. The Vorthok could have used machines for this work. But machines were expensive. Humans were free. Mireille had been born on a warm world far from here. As a child she had been trained to lead, to command, to show no weakness. The Empire had taught her that feelings were for lesser species. The humans had feelings. Look how weak they were. She had been sent to Kelthera 2 years ago. Her job was simple. Make sure the humans worked. Make sure they met their quotas. Make sure they did not cause trouble. Most humans died within 6 months. The cold took some. Accidents took others. Some simply gave up and stopped eating. Mireille did not care. New humans arrived every few weeks on transport ships. But something was wrong with the planet. Mireille had noticed it in recent weeks. The ice storms were getting worse. The ground shook more often. The deep tunnels were warmer than they should be. She had reported this to her commanders. They told her to keep working. The crystals were too valuable to stop mining. A few storms would not hurt the operation. Mireille was not so sure. She had grown up on cold worlds. She understood ice and snow. The planet felt different now. Angry, like it was waking up from a long sleep. But she followed orders. That was what good Vorthok did. The workday continued. Humans swung their tools against the ice walls. They loaded carts with broken ice and crystal pieces. They pushed these carts through the tunnels to the surface elevators. Dongwon worked near the deepest part of the mine. This was the most dangerous area. The ice here was so thick it was almost like stone. But the crystals were bigger here, more valuable. He worked with 5 other humans. Mireille knew their numbers but not their names. She did not care about their names, but she watched them work together. When one person got tired, another took their place. When someone's tool broke, they shared. This was not how the Vorthok worked. Each Vorthok competed with others. The best got promoted. The worst were sent to places like Kelt, Hera. As the day went on, the shaking in the ground got worse. Small pieces of ice fell from the tunnel ceiling. The humans looked worried. They whispered to each other when they thought no one was listening. Mireille could hear them. The Vorthok had better hearing than humans. "Something is wrong," one said. "The planet is angry," said another. "We should tell someone," a third whispered. "Who would listen to us?" Dongwon asked quietly. "We are just workers." Mireille almost smiled. At this, he was right. No one would listen to human workers, but she was listening, and she was starting to think they might be right about the planet. The work shift ended when the sun set. Not that anyone could see the sun through the constant storms, but the lights in the tunnels changed from white to red. This meant rest time. The humans were led back to their sleeping areas. Marie walked to her own quarters. They were warmer than the human areas. Better food, better beds. This was how it should be. But as she walked, she thought about what Dong had said, about working together, about taking care of each other. The Vorthok way was different. The Vorthok way was better, wasn't it? 3 weeks passed on Calthera. The ice storms grew stronger each day. The ground shook more often, but the mining work continued. Marie felt different. Something was changing in her body. At first, she thought it was the planet's strange energy affecting her, but soon she realized the truth. She was carrying a child. This discovery hit her like a frozen hammer. She sat alone in her quarters, staring at the medical scanner results. The small device showed what she feared most. Inside her body, new life was growing. But this was not a normal Vorthok child. The scanner showed mixed DNA patterns. Part Vorthok, part human. This should have been impossible. Her people said it could not happen. Yet here was the proof. Marie remembered the Empire's experiments from months ago. Scientists had taken samples from both Vorthok and human subjects. They wanted to create stronger workers. Beings who could survive in any environment. They had used her DNA without asking, without telling her. Now she carried the result of those experiments. Fear filled her chest. Not the clean fear of battle or danger. This was something deeper, more frightening. In Vorthok society, mixing with other species was forbidden. It was seen as corruption, weakness. If anyone discovered her condition, both she and the child would be killed. The Empire had no mercy for those who broke the purity laws. Even if it was not her choice, she would have to hide this. Keep it secret, until she could figure out what to do. The next morning brought new problems. The deep mining tunnels were getting too hot. Equipment was failing. The humans were reporting strange noises from the lowest levels. Marie went down to investigate. The elevator carried her deeper into the planet than she had ever gone before. The air grew warmer with each level. This was wrong. Kelthera was an ice world. The deep places should be colder, not warmer. She found Dongwon and his work team at the deepest mining point. They had stopped working. All of them stood very still, listening to something. What is the problem here? Marie demanded. Dongwon turned to face her. His expression was serious. The planet is changing. Listen. Marie stopped talking. In the silence, she could hear it. A low rumbling sound. Like something huge was moving far below them. The sound came and went like breathing. It started 2 days ago. Dongwon said, it gets louder each time. The ice walls are getting softer, too, and warmer. Marie touched the tunnel wall. He was right. The ice felt different, less solid. She could feel warmth coming from deeper in the planet. We think the mining has disturbed something, another human worker said. Something that was sleeping in the planet's core. Impossible, Marie said quickly, but she was not sure. The Empire's scientists had not fully studied Kelthera before starting the mining operation. They only cared about the crystals. We should stop the deep digging, Dongwon said, at least until we understand what is happening. Marie stared at him. A human worker was telling her what to do. This should have made her angry. Instead, she found herself thinking about his words. That is not your decision to make, she said. No, Dongwon agreed, but someone should make it soon. Before something bad happens. Over the following days, Marie's body continued to change. The child inside her was growing fast. Too fast for a normal pregnancy. She had to adjust her clothing to hide the changes. She ate her meals alone, so no one would see her strange new hunger. The strangest part was how she felt about the growing life inside her. Vorthok were taught that children were just future soldiers or workers, nothing more. But Marie found herself thinking about this child differently. She wondered what it would look like. Would it have her blue skin or human pink skin? Would it be strong like the Vorthok or clever like humans seem to be? Would it survive in this cold world? These thoughts scared her. Caring about something made you weak, made you vulnerable. She tried to push the feelings away, but they kept coming back. Meanwhile, the situation in the mines got worse. 3 tunnel collapses happened in 1 week. The strange rumbling sounds grew louder. Some equipment melted from the increasing heat in the deep levels. Marie sent reports to her commanders. She told them about the problems. About the danger signs, they sent back the same message every time. Keep working. The crystals were too valuable to stop. She began to understand something that disturbed her. The Empire did not care about the workers, human or Vorthok. They only cared about results. If this planet killed everyone on it, they would just send more workers. This thought should not have bothered her. It was the natural way. The strong survived, weak served the strong. But carrying this child was changing how she saw things. She started watching the human workers more carefully, not just to make sure they worked hard, but to understand them. She saw how they helped each other, how they shared their small amounts. of food, how they took turns sleeping so someone could always watch for danger, how they remembered the names of workers who died. Dongwon was often at the center of these acts of kindness. He was not the biggest or strongest human, but others looked to him for guidance. They trusted him. One day, Mireille saw him give his food ration to an older worker who was too sick to eat the regular meals. This meant Dongwon would go hungry. When she asked him why he did this, his answer confused her. Because he needed it more than I did, Dongwon said simply. But now you will be weak from hunger. Maybe, but he will be strong enough to keep working. That helps all of us. Mireille did not understand this logic. In Vorthok thinking, making yourself weak to help others was foolish. But somehow, the human workers seemed stronger when they worked together. Not weaker. As her pregnancy progressed, she felt the child moving inside her. These movements brought feelings she had never experienced. Protectiveness, worry, something that might have been love. These emotions terrified her, but she could not make them stop. The planet continued its slow awakening. Each day brought new signs of change, warmer air, stranger sounds, more equipment failures, and each day, Mireille grew more certain that something terrible was coming, something that would test everyone on Kelthera, including the child she now carried. The child came during the worst storm Kelthera had ever seen. Mireille was alone in her quarters when the pain started. She had not expected it to happen so soon, but the child was ready to be born. Outside her window, ice and snow flew through the air like bullets. The wind screamed louder than any living thing. The whole building shook with each gust. Mireille bit down on a cloth to keep from crying out. No one could know what was happening. She delivered the child by herself in the small room. Her hands shook as she caught the tiny being that came into the world. The baby was smaller than she expected. Its skin was not blue like hers. It was not pink like human skin either. It was something in between, a soft gray color that seemed to glow slightly in the dim light. The child's eyes opened and looked at her. They were dark like human eyes but shaped like Vorthok eyes. The baby made a small sound, not crying, just a quiet noise like it was trying to speak. For the first time in her life, Mireille felt her heart break open. Not from pain, but from something else. Something powerful and warm that filled her chest. She looked at this tiny creature and knew she would do anything to protect it. She wrapped the baby in her warmest blanket. The child was so small, it fit in her hands. She held it close to her chest and felt its tiny heartbeat against her skin. Jihoon, she whispered. The name came from somewhere deep inside her. She did not know why she chose it, but it felt right. For this small being who was part of two worlds, the baby looked weak. Its breathing was shallow. Mireille realized with growing panic that the child was too cold. Her Vorthok body was made for ice worlds. But this baby was half human. It needed more warmth than she could give. She tried everything she could think of. More blankets, warm water bottles. Even holding the baby next to the small heater in her room, nothing worked. Jihoon grew weaker with each passing hour. Outside, the storm was getting worse. But this was not a normal ice storm. Deep beneath the planet's surface, something huge was stirring. The mining operations had finally awakened. Whatever slept in Kelthara's core. The ground shook constantly now. Not just small tremors, but big movements that knocked people off their feet. Cracks appeared in the walls of buildings. The main power generator failed twice in one day. Emergency sirens began to wail across the colony. The evacuation order came. Through the communication system, all Vorthok personnel were to report to the transport ships immediately. The planet was no longer safe. But the order said nothing about the human workers. Mireille understood what this meant. The Empire was abandoning the humans to die. They would take their own people and leave everyone else behind. This was normal procedure. Humans were replaceable. She should have reported to the ships, should have left Jihoon somewhere and saved herself. That was what any smart Vorthok would do. Instead, she stayed in her room, holding her dying child. Jihoon's breathing got slower. His tiny body felt cold, even wrapped in warm blankets. Mireille watched helplessly as her baby grew weaker. She had never felt so afraid. Not afraid for herself, but afraid of losing someone else. The building shook again. This time pieces of the ceiling fell down. Cracks ran up the walls like spiderwebs. The heater stopped working completely. Through her window, Mireille could see the evacuation ships taking off. Bright lights in the storm as they lifted away from the dying planet. Soon she would be alone here with no way to escape. But all she could think about was Jihoon. The baby's eyes closed. His breathing became so faint she could barely see his chest moving. Mireille pressed her face against his tiny head and felt tears on her cheeks. She had never cried before. The Vorthok did not cry. She was losing him. Her child was dying, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. A loud crash came from somewhere in the building. Then she heard voices. Human voices calling to each other. They were still here. They had not been evacuated, but they were not dead yet. Through the broken walls, she could hear Dongwon's voice giving directions. He was organizing the remaining humans, trying to get them to safety even though no one was coming to save them. Mireille looked down at Jihoon. The child needed warmth that her cold Vorthok body could not provide, but humans were warm. Human body, heat might save him. The thought of asking humans for help went against everything she had been taught. They were the enemy. They were beneath her. Asking for their help would mean admitting weakness, but her child was dying. She wrapped Ji carefully in the warmest blanket she had. Then she opened her door and stepped into the collapsing hallway. The building was falling apart around her. Ice and debris covered the floor. Emergency lights flickered on and off. The storm outside roared like a living monster. She followed the sound of human voices through the dark passages. Her feet slipped on the icy floor. Pieces of the ceiling fell near her head, but she kept walking. She found them in the main tunnel system. About 20 human workers were gathered around Dongwon. They had flashlights and emergency supplies. They were planning their escape route to the emergency shelter. When they saw her, they all went quiet. Their eyes were full of hate and fear. She was their oppressor, the one who had made their lives miserable. They had every reason to hurt her now that she was alone and helpless. Dongwon stepped forward. His face was hard but not cruel. "The ship's left without you," he said. "Yes." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Why are you here?" Mireille looked down at the bundle in her arms. Ji-hoon was so still she could not tell if he was still breathing. Her hands shook as she pulled back the blanket. The humans gasped when they saw the baby. This tiny creature that was part Vorthok and part human, the result of their oppressors' experiments. "He is dying," she said. "He needs warmth. Human warmth." She looked up at Dongwon, this man she had tormented for months. This human she had treated like an animal. "Please," she whispered. "Help him." The tunnel was silent except for the storm raging outside. 20 human workers stared at Mireille and the dying baby in her arms. Their faces showed confusion, anger, and something else. Something that might have been pity. Mireille stood before them like a broken statue. The proud Vorthok overseer was gone. In her place was a desperate mother holding her child. Her blue skin looked pale in the flickering emergency lights. Her hands shook as she waited for their answer. Dongwon looked at the baby. Ji-hoon was so small and still. His breathing was barely visible. The child's gray skin had turned almost white from the cold. "This is your child," Dongwon said. It was not a question. "Yes," Mireille's voice cracked. "The Empire's experiments. They used my DNA without permission, created him in their labs, and now he is dying because he is part human. Yes, I cannot give him the warmth he needs. My body is made for cold, but he needs human warmth to survive." The other workers whispered to each other. Their voices were angry. One man stepped forward. His name was Hyunwoo. He had scars on his face from a mining accident months ago. Mireille had refused to let him rest while he healed. "You expect us to help you." Hyunwoo's voice was full of rage. "After everything you have done to us. After watching our friends die and doing nothing, I know what I have done," Mireille said quietly. "I know you have no reason to help me. But he is innocent. He never hurt anyone. He is the child of our enemy." Another worker said, "Why should we care if he lives or dies? Because that is what makes us different from them." The voice came from an old woman named Suman. She was the oldest human in the group. She had been on Kelthara longer than anyone else. Her hair was white and her hands were bent from years of hard work. "We are not like the Vorthok," Suman continued. "We do not let children die because of who their parents are. That is what makes us human. She tortured us," Hyunwoo said. "She watched us suffer and did nothing." "Yes," Suman agreed, "but look at her now. She is just a mother with a dying child. Nothing more." The building shook again. This time the tremor. It was so strong that everyone had to grab the walls to stay standing. Cracks spread across the ceiling. Water began to drip from somewhere above. "We need to move," Dongwon said. "The emergency shelter is still 2 kilometers away." Through the storm, he looked at Mireille and the baby. Then he made his choice. Dongwon began to remove his thermal jacket. It was the only thing keeping him warm in the freezing tunnel. Without it, he would be in danger from the cold. "What are you doing?" Hyunwoo asked. "What needs to be done?" Dongwon replied. He took off his jacket and his thick shirt underneath. His skin was pale and covered with goosebumps immediately. The cold air made him shiver. "Give me the child," he said to Mireille. Mireille hesitated. Everything she had been taught told her this was wrong. Humans were inferior. They were dirty. They were dangerous. But her child was dying. Slowly, she handed Ji-hoon to Dongwon. Dongwon took the tiny baby and held him against his bare chest. His warm human skin touched the cold gray skin of the child. Then he wrapped his shirt around both of them and put his jacket back on. The change was immediate. Ji-hoon's breathing became stronger. His skin began to show more color. The baby made a small sound and moved slightly against Dongwon's chest. "He is getting warmer," Dongwon said with wonder in his voice. Mireille stared at him. This human man was risking his own life to save her child, the child of his oppressor. She had never seen such kindness before. She did not understand how someone could be so generous to their enemy. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you helping us?" Dongwon looked at her with those steady eyes that had always confused her. "Because it is the right thing to do." because he is just a baby who needs help, because that is what humans do. But I have been cruel to you. To all of you, yes you have. But that does not change what is right. The other workers were watching this exchange with mixed feelings. Some still looked angry, others seemed confused. But slowly, understanding began to show on their faces. We need to move now, Dongwon said. The shelter is not far, but the storm is getting worse. He began to shiver from the cold. Sharing his body heat with the baby was warming Ji-hoon but making Dongwon colder. The other workers noticed this without being asked. A young man named Minho took off his own jacket and put it around Dongwon's shoulders. Then Suman gave him her scarf. Other workers shared their gloves and hats. Mireille watched in amazement as these humans worked together to help each other. And to help her child. They had every reason to hate her. Every reason to let her baby die. Instead, they were showing mercy. Stay close, Dongwon told her. The path to the shelter is dangerous in this storm. We will help you get there safely. I do not understand, Mireille said. Why are you being kind to me? I am your enemy. No, Dongwon said simply. You were our oppressor. But right now, you are just a mother, trying to save her child. That makes you something we can understand. They began to move through the collapsing facility. The storm outside was stronger than anything Mireille had ever seen. The wind tried to knock them down with every step. Snow flew through the air so thick they could barely see. But the humans moved together like a team. They helped each other walk through the deep snow. They shared their strength when someone got tired. They protected each other from the worst of the wind, and they protected Mireille and her child too. For the first time in her life, Mireille began to understand what compassion really meant. It was not weakness. It was a kind of strength she had never known existed. The journey to the emergency shelter was the hardest thing any of them had ever done. The storm turned the world into a white nightmare. Snow fell so thick they could not see more than a few steps ahead. The wind was so strong it knocked people down like toys. Dong, one led the group through the storm. He knew the way to the shelter from his months of working in the outer mining areas. But carrying Ji-hoon against his chest made everything harder. The baby's weight was small, but the position was awkward. And sharing his body heat was making him dangerously cold. After the first hour, Dongwon began to stumble. His lips turned blue. His hands shook so badly he could barely hold on to Ji-hoon. The other workers saw what was happening. Let me carry the child for a while, Minho said. Dongwon nodded gratefully. He carefully transferred the baby to Minho's warm chest. Ji-hoon was looking much better now. His breathing was strong, and his skin had a healthy color. But the constant need for human warmth was taking its toll on the workers. They took turns carrying the baby. Each person gave their body heat for as long as they could before becoming too cold. Then someone else would take over. It was the only way to keep both Ji-hoon and themselves alive. Mireille watched this with growing amazement. These humans were risking their lives for a child who represented everything they should hate. The baby was part Vorthok, part of the species that had enslaved them, tortured them, killed their friends, but they did not see an enemy when they looked at Ji-hoon. They saw a baby who needed help. I still do not understand, she said to Suman as they walked. Why do you help him? He is not human. He is not Vorthok either. The old woman replied. He is something new, something that belongs to both our peoples. Maybe that makes him a bridge between us. A bridge, a way for our species to understand each other. To stop being enemies. This idea was strange to Mireille. The Vorthok taught that other species were meant to serve them, not to be equal with them. But looking at these humans working together, she began to wonder if the Vorthok were wrong about many things. The storm got worse as they traveled. The wind howled like a living thing. Snow piled up so deep it was hard to walk through. Several times the group had to stop and dig each other out of snowdrifts. By the third hour, Dongwon was in serious trouble. Even with extra clothes from the others, his body temperature was dropping dangerously low. He had given too much of his warmth to save Ji-hoon. Now he was paying the price. He fell down in the snow and could not get up. His skin was white and cold. His breathing was shallow. The signs of severe hypothermia were clear. We have to get him warm, Hyunwoo said, or he will die. But they had no extra heat to give. Everyone was already cold. The emergency shelter was still far away, and the storm was getting stronger. Mirae looked at Dongwon lying in the snow. This human had saved her child's life. He had shown her kindness when she deserved only hate. Now he was dying because of his compassion. She made a decision that would have been impossible for her just days before. Put him against me, she said. The others stared at her in confusion. Vorthok, body temperature is different from human, she explained. Colder, normally, but I can control it. Make it warmer when needed. It will help him. This was true, but it was also dangerous for her. Raising her body temperature took a lot of energy. In this storm, it could weaken her enough to kill them both, but she did not care about the risk anymore. The workers carefully placed Dongwon against Mireille's side. She wrapped her arms around him and began to raise her body temperature. Heat flowed from her blue skin into his cold human flesh. It worked. Slowly, Dongwon's breathing became stronger. Color returned to his face. After several minutes, he opened his eyes. Thank you, he whispered. Mirae nodded. She was exhausted from the effort of warming him, but seeing him alive made it worthwhile. Can you walk? She asked. I think so. They helped Dongwon to his feet. He was weak but alive. The group continued through the storm. Now Mireille was supporting Dongwon while others carried Jihoon. They were all working together to survive. The emergency shelter appeared through the snow, like a miracle. It was a small building made of strong metal, built to survive the worst storms Kelthera could produce. They stumbled inside and collapsed on the floor. The shelter was cold, but it was warm compared to the storm outside. There were emergency supplies, food, water, medical equipment. For the first time in hours, they were safe. Jihoon was healthy and strong now. The constant human warmth had saved his life completely. He looked around with bright eyes and made happy baby sounds. Mireille held her son and looked at the humans who had saved him. They were exhausted, cold, hungry, but they were alive, and they had chosen to save her child even when it put them in danger. I owe you a debt I can never repay, she said to them. You do not owe us anything, Dongwon replied. We did what anyone should do for a child in need. Not anyone, Mireille said sadly. My people would not have helped. The Vorthok would have let him die. Then maybe it is time for things to change, Suman said. Outside, the storm continued to rage. Inside the shelter, something new was beginning, a friendship between enemies. An understanding between species who had been at war, and at the center of it all was a small baby who carried the hope of both peoples in his mixed blood. 3 days passed before the rescue ships arrived. The emergency shelter had enough supplies to keep everyone alive, but it was crowded and cold. 21 humans, 1 Vorthok, and 1 baby shared the small space. During those 3 days, something remarkable happened. The barriers between species began to break down. Mireille learned the names of all the human workers, not their numbers but their real names. Dongwon told her about his life before the war, how he had been an engineer on Earth, how he had a family who might still be alive somewhere. Suman shared stories of her grandchildren. She had been a teacher before the Vorthok invasion. She taught Mireille some human lullabies to sing to Jihoon. Even Hunwoo, who had been the most angry, began to soften. He showed Mireille pictures of his wife that he kept hidden in his shoe. She had died in the first bombing of Earth, but he still carried her memory. I hated all Vorthok for what happened to her, he admitted. But watching you with your son, I remember that mothers are the same everywhere. Love is the same everywhere. Mireille learned more about humanity in those 3 days than she had in years of commanding them. She saw their humor, their creativity, their endless capacity for hope, even in the darkest times. They taught her human games to pass the time. They shared their stories and their dreams. They included her in their conversations like she was one of them, and they all took turns caring for Jihoon. The baby became the center of their small community. He did not see differences between species. To him, anyone who held him with love was family. When the rescue ships finally arrived, Mireille faced the hardest decision of her life. The ships were Vorthok military vessels. They had come to search for survivors and salvage what they could from the failed mining operation. Through the radio, the ship commanders demanded to know why she had not evacuated with the others. I was trapped in the deep tunnels when the evacuation order came, she lied. These human workers helped me reach the emergency shelter. This was partly true, but not the whole truth. She did not mention did not explain why she had really stayed behind. The ship commander's voice was cold through the radio. Very well, we will transport you back to the fleet. The human workers will be left here to await the next prison transport. Mireille's blood went cold. She knew what this meant. The next prison transport would never come. The planet was too dangerous now. The humans would be left to die. She looked around the shelter at the people who had saved her child, who had shown her what real strength looked like, who had taught her the meaning of compassion. She could not abandon them. No, she said into the radio. The human workers come with us. There was silence from the ship. Then the commander's voice came back, confused and angry. That is not standard procedure. Human prisoners are not evacuated from failed operations. These humans are not prisoners, Mireille said, her voice growing stronger. They are essential personnel. They have knowledge of the deep mining operations that the Empire needs. They must be preserved. It was a lie. But it was a lie that could save lives. This is highly irregular, the commander said. I am the ranking officer on this planet, Mireille replied. The decision is mine to make. She was using her authority to protect the people who had become her friends. It was a risk that could cost her everything. But she no longer cared about her career or her standing in the Empire. The rescue took several hours. The storm was still too strong for the ships to land safely. They had to use emergency transport pods to lift people from the shelter. As they waited for their turn, Dongwon spoke quietly to Mireille. You do not have to do this, he said. You could tell them the truth. Save yourself, and let you all die. No, you saved my son. Now I save you. But your people will not understand. They will punish you for helping humans. Mireille looked down at Jihoon, sleeping in her arms. The baby's face was peaceful and content. He did not know that the future would be difficult for him. That being half human and half Orc would make him an outcast in both societies. But he would grow up knowing that kindness existed in the universe, that people could choose to help each other instead of hurt each other. That love was stronger than hate. Maybe it is time for my people to learn something new, she said. The transport pods came for them one by one. As each human worker was lifted to safety, they said goodbye to Mireille and Ji-hoon. They promised to remember what had happened in the shelter, to tell others about the Vorthok who had chosen compassion over cruelty. Dongwon was the last to leave. Before stepping into his transport pod, he gently touched Ji-hoon's tiny hand. He will grow up to be something special, Dongwon said. A bridge between our peoples, a symbol of hope. I will make sure he knows about the humans who saved his life, Mireille promised. About the man who gave his warmth to keep him alive, and I will tell everyone about the Vorthok who chose love over hate, who risked everything to save the people who had been her enemies. The last transport pod lifted them all to safety. As they rose through the storm, Mireille looked down at the dying planet below. Kelthera would never again be a source of crystals for the Empire, but it had given her something more valuable than any mineral. It had given her a new understanding of what it meant to be alive, to care for others, to choose hope over fear. Aboard the rescue ship, she faced questions from the military commanders. She stuck to her story about the essential human personnel. Her reputation as a successful overseer helped convince them, for now, the humans were safe. But Mireille knew the real work was just beginning. She would have to find ways to protect these people in a society that saw them as less than animals. She would have to raise her son in a world that would not accept him as he was. It would not be easy, but as she held Ji-hoon and remembered the kindness of the humans who had saved him, she felt something she had never experienced before: hope. The ice storm had nearly destroyed them all, but from that destruction had come something new. Something that might one day change the relationship between their species forever. A small baby slept in her arms, half Orthok, half human, completely loved. In his mixed blood was the promise of a better future, a future where compassion would be stronger than conquest, where understanding would triumph over hatred. The storm was over. The new beginning had started.